Welcome to True Horror Stories Film. My name is Jonathan. I had been grateful if you'd settle in and watch this video before you get too cozy. I would love to hear from you. Let me know. How do you feel about this? What are your thoughts? Tonight, we explore what happens when family secrets collide with something far older than human memory. Before we begin, these are atmospheric horror stories, horror that crawls under your skin and lingers, so if you enjoy content like this, consider subscribing. It helps me bring you more stories like this. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and what is the current time there. Now, let me tell you about Marcus Chen, and the terrible truth he discovered about his father's disappearance. I was 9 years old when my father vanished during a hunting trip near Keta, West Virginia. That is what they told me anyway. What they did not tell me was that my Uncle Lee had been there when it happened. What they did not tell me was that my father had walked into an abandoned mine shaft and simply never walked out. What they did not tell me was that Lee had watched him go in and had done nothing to stop him. I did not learn these things until 13 years later, when Lee invited me to visit the site for closure. By then, I was 22 years old, working at a repair shop in Welch, and I thought I had made peace with my father's disappearance. I thought the open wound had scarred over. I was wrong. The drive to Keta took us through winding back roads where horse farms stretched behind white fences, and the mountains pressed close on either side. Lee had been distant for years after my father disappeared. My mother said I reminded him too much of his younger brother, that seeing me brought him pain. When he finally reached out, asking to meet, I jumped at the chance. I had missed him. He was the only paternal figure I had left after my grandfather died. We spent the morning at his place near Filbert, catching up over cold cuts and beer. Lee seemed different, calmer somehow, but there was something behind his eyes I could not quite read. When he suggested we drive up to the site where my father had last been seen, I hesitated. But Lee insisted it might help both of us find peace. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The hike started well enough. We walked through dense forest east of Keta, following what Lee said was the path they had taken that day. He talked about my father constantly, sharing memories I had never heard before. It was like he needed to keep talking, to fill the silence with my father's ghost. I did not mind. I wanted to hear about the man I had barely known. After about 2 hours of hiking, we came to a rocky outcropping that overlooked a series of abandoned mine entrances carved into the mountainside. Warning signs had been hammered into the dirt, their paint faded and peeling. Keep out. Danger. Risk of collapse. The usual deterrents that never actually kept anyone out. That is when Lee stopped walking. He stood there, staring down at the mines, and his whole body seemed to tense. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, hollow. "There is something I never told you," he said. "Something I never told your mother either." My stomach dropped. I knew, somehow, that whatever came next would change everything. Lee told me that the last time he saw my father had been walking into one of those mine shafts. Not lost. Not confused. Walking in with purpose, like something was calling him. Lee said he had screamed after him, begged him to stop, but my father had not even turned around. He had just kept walking into the darkness until Lee could not see him anymore. Lee had searched the mines for hours afterward. He had called for help. He had done everything he could. But when the search and rescue teams arrived and explored the safe sections of the mines, they found nothing. No body. No trace. Just strange graffiti in one of the tunnels that the private investigator later documented. Symbols and words in a language no one could identify. "I need you to understand," Lee said, and his hands were shaking. I tried to stop him. I swear I tried. I should have left then. I should have turned around and hiked back to the car and driven home and never come back. But I was 22, and stupid and angry, and I wanted answers. So, when Lee suggested we walk down to the mine entrance, I agreed. The descent was steep. We had to pick our way carefully down the rocky slope, using trees for support. At the bottom, the mine entrance gaped like a wound in the mountain. The air near it smelled wrong. Old and stale and somehow rotten. Lee stepped closer to the entrance, and I followed. The temperature dropped immediately. My breath fogged in the suddenly cold air. Inside the mine, I could see the glint of old metal tracks, rusted and half buried in silt. The walls were slick with moisture. And then I saw the graffiti. It covered the tunnel walls, stretching back as far as my flashlight could reach. Not spray paint. Not crude teenage tags. This looked ancient, painted in something black and oily that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The symbols were intricate, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Between the symbols were words in a script I had never seen before, angular and aggressive. "Do you remember what the private investigator said about this?" I asked Lee, but he was not listening. He was staring into the darkness, and his face had gone pale. "I brought you here because you deserve to know the truth," he said. His voice sounded strange, almost mechanical. "But there is more. Things I cannot explain." He reached into his jacket, and when his hand came out he was holding a gun. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the barrel come up. I saw his finger on the trigger. I saw his mouth moving, forming words, but I was already running. The first shot was deafening in the confined space. I felt the bullet pass close enough to my head that the air displacement made my ear ring. I did not look back. I just ran deeper into the mine, my small keychain flashlight barely penetrating the darkness. Behind me, Lee was screaming. Not at me. At someone or something else. "He is here," Lee shouted, his voice breaking. "I brought him. I did what you asked. Please. Please. I did what you asked." I dove into a side chamber, pressing myself against the cold stone wall. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst. I could hear Lee's footsteps echoing through the main tunnel, slow and methodical. He was hunting me. That is when I started noticing details I had missed in my panic. The chamber I was hiding in had more of that strange writing on the walls. But here, it was different. Someone had added to it more recently. English words mixed with the ancient symbols. "He feeds on years. The mine remembers. We all came back eventually." My flashlight flickered, and in that moment of dimness, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Scratched into the stone, barely visible, were names. Dozens of names. Some looked decades old. Some looked recent. And there, near the bottom, carved in shaking letters, was my father's name. Stanley Chen. Below it, a date. The day he disappeared. Below that, carved more recently, was another name. Lee Chen. No date yet. I heard Lee's footsteps stop. The silence that followed was worse than the shooting had been. Then, from somewhere deep in the mine, I heard something else. Not footsteps. Something sliding. Something that sounded like rocks shifting, but with a rhythm that was almost organic. Lee started talking again, but this time his voice was different. Higher. Terrified. "I did what you wanted," he said. "I brought him, just like I brought Stanley. Please, please, let me go." I kept my promise. The sliding sound grew louder, closer. Then Lee started screaming. It was not the scream of someone being attacked. It was the scream of someone seeing something their mind could not process. The scream went on and on, echoing through the tunnels, until it cut off with a sound like wet fabric tearing. Then silence. I do not know how long I stayed frozen in that chamber. It felt like hours. Eventually, I forced myself to move. I had to get out. I had to survive this. I crept back toward the main tunnel, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The beam caught something on the ground. Lee's gun, lying in the middle of the tunnel. No Lee. No blood. Just the gun. I ran. I ran until my lungs burned, and my legs screamed, and I thought I would collapse. I ran until I saw the gray light of the entrance, and then I ran faster. I burst out of the mine into the late afternoon sun. I scrambled up the slope, not caring about the branches that tore at my clothes and skin. I did not stop until I reached my truck. The drive back to town was a blur. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the steering wheel. I stopped at a motel in Quetta and called the sheriff's department. I told them everything. The shooting. The screaming. Lee disappearing. They found shell casings at the mine entrance. They found Lee's gun. They found footprints going in. They never found Lee. The sheriff's official explanation was a gas blowout. They said carbon dioxide had built up in the mine, that Lee had been disoriented and confused, that he had attacked me in his delirium, and then wandered deeper into the mine where the gas concentration was fatal. They said they could not recover his body because the mine was too unstable. They did not mention the graffiti. They did not mention the names carved into the stone. They did not mention that when they sent a team in to seal the mine with explosives, 3 of the workers refused to go inside after the first survey. They quit on the spot. I tried to move on. I tried to forget. But some things stay with you. I started researching. I found old newspaper articles about the mines near Quetta. The Victorine Mine and the Horton Mine, they were called. Built in the late 70s, early 80s. Expected to produce gold. The Horton Mine never did. The Victorine Mine did, for a while. But that was not what made me keep digging. What made me keep digging was the pattern. Every few years, someone would go missing near those mines. Sometimes hikers. Sometimes local kids. Sometimes hunters. Their cases would go cold. The explanations would always be the same. Lost in the woods. Fell down a shaft. Animal attack. But I found something else. I found an old journal entry from 1800 and something. Scanned and uploaded to a historical archive. A fur trapper describing a place he called Hungry Hollow. He said the mountain there had a hunger that never stopped. He said the indigenous people who lived there before colonization had sealed the caves with stones and warned never to open them. He said some hungers are older than human memory, and some places remember things that should be forgotten. He never went back. He wrote that he would rather starve than return to that place. I also found something in my father's old belongings that my mother had kept in storage. A journal he had kept during his hunting trips. The last entry, dated the day before he disappeared, was a single line. Lee says he wants to show me something important. Something about the land. My father had not gotten lost. He had been led there, just like I had been. It has been 2 years since that day. I installed 3 deadbolts on my apartment door. I check them multiple times before bed. I avoid hiking. I avoid forests. I avoid anywhere that feels too quiet, too still, too much like the inside of that mine. But sometimes, late at night, I think about those names carved into the stone. I think about the pattern. Every few years, someone new. I think about the fact that Lee had my father's name memorized well enough to carve it perfectly in the dark. I think about the fact that the mine was supposed to be sealed, but last month, someone reported seeing fresh footprints near the entrance. And I think about the fact that last week, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed the mine entrance. Standing in front of it was a figure too distant to identify clearly. But I could see enough to know they were holding up a sign. The sign had my name on it. I do not know what is in that mine. I do not know if it is something supernatural or something we just do not have the science to explain yet. Some researchers talk about stone tape theory, the idea that traumatic events can be recorded in the environment itself, played back under certain conditions. Others talk about geological formations that can produce infrasound, frequencies below human hearing that cause paranoia and fear. But those theories do not explain the names. They do not explain the pattern. They do not explain why Lee would shoot at me while begging something else for mercy. What I do know is this. There are places in this world that hunger. Places that remember. Places that take. And once they know your name, they never stop calling. The mine near Quetta is sealed now. The sheriff made sure of that. But sealing something and killing something are not the same thing. I moved 3 states away last month. Changed my phone number. Deleted my social media. I tell myself, it is enough. I tell myself I am safe now. But every time I see a missed call from an unknown number, every time I find a photograph in my mailbox with no postage, every time I wake up at 3 a.m. convinced I heard someone calling my name, I remember the way Lee screamed in that mine, and I wonder how long until it is my turn to go back. Because that is what the graffiti said, was it not? We all came back eventually. Tonight, we explore about when nature marks you, when a near-death experience becomes something that follows you home. Now, let me tell you about Daniel Martinez and the day lightning tried to claim him. I am writing this because I need people to understand that surviving something does not mean it is over. My name is Daniel. I am 20 years old now, and 3 years ago, I was struck by lightning while doing yard work. The doctors tell me I am lucky to be alive. My family tells me I am blessed. But they do not hear what I hear. They do not see what I have seen. This happened in July 2021. I was 17. Saving money for college by doing lawn care around the neighborhood. It was a Thursday afternoon, and Mr. Jacobs had hired me to weed whack his property before the weekend. The sky had been clear when I started at 3 in the afternoon, but by 4:30, dark clouds were rolling in from the west, heavy and swollen with rain. I should have stopped. I know that now. But I was young, and I wanted to finish the job. And the storm looked like it was still miles away. I kept working, the weed whacker buzzing in my hands, the smell of cut grass and gasoline mixing with something else, something metallic that I did not recognize at the time. Ozone, I learned later. The smell of electricity in the air. The Ring camera on Mr. Jacobs's porch captured what happened next, though the actual strike knocked it offline. One moment, I was trimming along the fence line. The next moment, witnesses say, there was a crack so loud it set off car alarms 3 blocks away. I do not remember the lightning itself. I do not remember the pain. What I remember is waking up on the ground, unable to breathe, my chest feeling like someone had driven a truck over it, my shirt smoking. Neighbors were screaming. Someone was on the phone with 911. I could hear thunder rolling overhead, another crack, and people running toward me. Then I saw my hands. The skin on my palms was red and blistered, where I had been gripping the metal shaft of the weed whacker. My shirt, when they carefully lifted it in the emergency room, hours later, had a hole burned straight through the fabric, right over my heart. I spent 3 days in the hospital. They told me I had moderate burns, that my heart rhythm had been disrupted, but stabilized, that I was experiencing something called coronal paralysis, a temporary paralysis that can occur after a lightning strike. They told me I would recover. They told me I was one of the lucky ones. They told me that 6 people had already been killed by lightning that year, that 40 million strikes hit the United States annually, that I had survived something most people do not. But they did not tell me about the other things. The things that would come after. It started 3 weeks after I came home from the hospital. I was trying to sleep, trying to return to some kind of normal life, when I heard it. A low rumble, distant, but unmistakable. Thunder. I sat up in bed, my chest suddenly tight, my heart racing. But when I looked outside, the sky was clear. Stars everywhere. Not a cloud to be seen. I told myself it was trauma. Post-traumatic stress. The therapist I had started seeing said it was normal for survivors to have heightened anxiety around storms, that my brain was processing the experience, that it would fade with time. But it did not fade. It got worse. The next time I heard it, I was in class. Late September, a bright sunny afternoon, and suddenly there was thunder rolling through my skull. I looked around. No one else reacted. The teacher kept talking about the Revolutionary War. Students kept taking notes. And I sat there, gripping my desk, feeling the vibration of distant thunder that only I could hear. Then the dreams started. Every night I would dream of storms. Not normal storms. Storms that moved with purpose, that followed specific paths, that seemed to be looking for something. In the dreams, I would be hiking in mountains I had never seen, trails winding through forests I had never visited, and the sky above me would darken with clouds that moved against the wind. I would try to run, try to find shelter, but the thunder would get louder, closer, and I would wake up gasping, my chest aching in the exact spot where the lightning had entered my body. In October, I found the article online. I had been searching for information about long-term effects of lightning strikes, looking for something to explain what was happening to me. That is when I found the story of the unnamed Dutch hiker. August 12, 2004. Bristle Cone Loop Trail, near Yimpa Point, elevation 9,000 feet. A 58-year-old man from the Netherlands had been hiking with his wife and friends when a sudden storm rolled in. They were on an exposed section of trail when lightning struck. He died instantly. The article said his name had been withheld at his family's request. It said he had been taking photographs of the storm clouds just seconds before he was hit. His camera, recovered from the scene, still held that final image. I do not know why, but I became obsessed with this story. There was something about it that felt connected to me, something I could not explain. I started researching other lightning deaths, other incidents. I found stories of teenagers struck while hiking in Utah, of workers electrocuted during storms, of people killed on mountaintops and beaches and open fields. And I started to notice something strange. The dates, the locations. There was a pattern. It was not obvious at first. But when I mapped them out, when I started tracking every lightning death within a certain radius over the past 20 years, I saw it. They formed a line. A route that wound through the mountains, across state lines, following the high country like something was traveling, hunting, marking territory. And the line was moving toward me. I know how this sounds. I know you are reading this and thinking I am crazy, that the lightning damaged something in my brain, that trauma has made me paranoid. But I need you to understand that I have documented everything. I have the maps. I have the dates. I have the weather reports that show storms appearing where no storm should have been, striking in patterns that meteorologists could not explain. In November, a woman was struck and killed while hiking in the Sandia Mountains outside Albuquerque. The trail was one I had been planning to visit. The storm came out of nowhere, witnesses said. Clear sky one moment, lightning the next. She was 23 years old. She was doing everything right, they said. She had checked the weather. She had followed the 30-30 rule, that piece of advice everyone shares. If you see lightning and hear thunder within 30 seconds, seek shelter for 30 minutes. But it did not matter. The lightning found her anyway. The article mentioned that rescue crews had spent 6 hours recovering her body from a crevasse where she had fallen after being struck. They had to dig through granite, remove boulders, carefully extract her from a gap in the rocks barely wider than her shoulders. And when I read that description, something cold settled into my chest. because I had dreamed that exact scenario. 3 days before it happened, I had dreamed of a woman trapped in stone, thunder echoing through narrow passages, rescue workers digging by a headlamp while something waited in the darkness above them. I tried to tell people. My parents thought I was having a breakdown. My therapist increased my medication. My friends stopped returning my calls. No one wanted to hear that I could feel storms coming before they appeared, that I could hear thunder in my bones when the sky was clear, that something had marked me that day in Mr. Jacobs's yard, and now it was tracking me through dreams and coincidence and death. Last week, I had the worst dream yet. I was standing at Niagara Falls, watching the water cascade into the gorge below. The sky was darkening, but not with clouds. With something else. Something that pulsed and breathed and rolled like smoke. And then I heard it. Not thunder this time. The sound of stone cracking. The sound of rock giving way. I turned and saw the cliff face shuddering, watched as 185,000 tons of stone collapsed into the abyss, taking everything with it. I woke up and immediately checked the news. Nothing. But I know it is coming, just like I knew about the woman in the mountains, just like I have known about every strike that has occurred within 200 miles of me since July 2021. The doctors say I am experiencing hypervigilance, pattern recognition gone into overdrive, the result of a traumatized brain trying to regain control by finding connections that do not exist. But they cannot explain why I have a scar on my chest that throbs before every storm. They cannot explain why I can taste ozone hours before weather services issue warnings. They cannot explain why, when I close my eyes, I can see trails I have never hiked and faces I have never met and lightning that has not yet fallen. Tomorrow, I am supposed to start my junior year of college. I'm supposed to be moving into a dorm, meeting my roommate, going to orientation. But, instead, I am packing a different kind of bag. Emergency supplies, first aid, a hand crank radio, detailed maps of the backcountry. Because the dreams have shown me where I need to go. There is a trail, remote and rarely used, where the next strike will happen. There is someone there who does not know they are about to die. Someone I might be able to warn if I can reach them in time. I know you are reading this and thinking I cannot save them. I know you think I am chasing ghosts, running toward danger instead of away from it. But you do not understand. The lightning did not just hit me that day in Mr. Jacobs's yard. It changed me, marked me, made me part of something I am only beginning to comprehend. They say lightning never strikes the same place twice. But that is not true. Lightning returns to the points it has marked, follows paths it has already burned into the earth. And I am one of those points now. I carry the storm with me. I can feel it in my chest, in the rhythm of my heart that has never quite returned to normal, in the static that builds under my skin when pressure systems change. I am leaving this account online because I need someone to know what happened to me, what is still happening. If you are reading this, and I have not posted an update within 72 hours, then you will know that the pattern has completed. That the storm has finished what it started. But, until then, I am going to that trail. I'm going to try to warn whoever is there. Because even if no one believes me, even if everyone thinks I am insane, I cannot let another person die the way that Dutch hiker died, the way that woman in the sandiest died, the way I should have died 3 years ago. The thunder is getting louder. The dreams are getting clearer. And the storm, whatever it is, wherever it is going, it is almost here. I still check the weather every day. I still count the seconds between lightning and thunder, even when I am the only one who can see the flash, the only one who can hear the roll. And I still remember what the paramedics said to me in the ambulance, after they had stabilized my heart, after they had wrapped my burns, when I was drifting in and out of consciousness. He leaned close and said, "You are lucky, son. Lightning usually does not let go once it has you. But he was wrong about one thing. It did not let go. It never let go. That is Daniel's account, last updated 6 weeks ago. Since then, there have been no further posts to his blog, no activity on his social media, no responses to the dozens of messages people have sent asking if he is okay. His parents filed a missing person report after he failed to show up for the fall semester. Search and rescue teams have been looking for him in the areas he mapped in his final posts. They have not found him yet. But last Thursday, during a freak lightning storm that appeared without warning over the Sandia Mountains, hikers reported hearing someone screaming in the distance. When they reached the location, they found fresh boot prints leading to the edge of a cliff and a backpack containing maps marked with red circles and dates that had not yet arrived. The storm passed as quickly as it came. But in the places where lightning struck that day, the stone was marked with patterns that looked almost like handprints, like someone had pressed their palms against the rock while electricity poured through them. The search continues, but those of us who have read Daniel's account, who have seen his maps and checked his predictions, we know that sometimes people do not want to be found. Sometimes they are following something the rest of us cannot see. And sometimes, when lightning strikes, it is not trying to kill you. It is trying to take you home. This happened to me in the summer of 2018, when I was working the graveyard shift at a gas station just outside Hollow Ridge, Tennessee. I am posting this because I need to know if anyone else has experienced what I experienced, or if anyone can explain what I saw. To this day, I still do not know if I encountered something supernatural, or if I stumbled into something far worse. Now, let me tell you about the summer I learned that some hungers are older than memory, and some people are not people at all. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I am 24 years old. I was working at a 24-hour gas station on the outskirts of a small Appalachian town because I needed the money. I had just finished my postdoctoral research at the University of Tennessee, studying Appalachian communities and folklore, but academic positions are hard to come by. So there I was, stocking shelves and ringing up cigarettes at 3 in the morning, trying to pay off student loans while I waited for something better. The gas station sat at a crossroads between Hollow Ridge and the larger town of Kingsport. During the day, we got a steady stream of truckers and travelers passing through. At night, the place was usually dead. Just me, the fluorescent lights, and the occasional drunk stumbling in for beer or lottery tickets. I had been working there for about 2 months when I started noticing the old woman. She came in every night at exactly 2:17 in the morning. I know the exact time because I started paying attention after the third night. She would shuffle through the door, moving slowly with a walking stick, wearing the same faded floral dress and threadbare cardigan. Her face was deeply lined, her hands gnarled with age. I would have guessed she was in her 80s, maybe older. She never bought anything. She would just walk up to the counter, smile at me with missing teeth, and ask the same question in a raspy voice that sounded like wind through dead leaves. "Have you seen my grandson?" The first few times, I told her no, I had not seen anyone. I asked her what he looked like, if she had a picture, if I should call someone to help her get home. But she would just smile that empty smile and shuffle back out into the darkness. After a week of this, I started to feel uneasy. There was something wrong about her visits. She always came at exactly 2:17. She always wore the same clothes. And most disturbing of all, she never seemed to age or change. Her clothes never got dirtier. Her hair was always the same. It was like watching the same recording play over and over. I mentioned it to my coworker Jake, who worked the evening shift before mine. He looked at me strangely when I described her. "Sarah," he said slowly, "there is no old woman around here who matches that description. And trust me, I know everyone in Hollow Ridge. My family has been here for generations. That should have been my first warning. But I was tired, stressed about money, and I convinced myself that Jake just did not know everyone. It was a small town, but not that small. Then things got worse. It was a Tuesday night around 1:30 in the morning when a man came in. He was maybe in his mid-20s, tall and thin, wearing a purple flannel shirt that looked too clean, too perfect. He had an easy smile and friendly eyes. He grabbed a few items, a bag of chips, a soda, some beef jerky, and came up to pay. "Working late?" he asked as I rang him up. "Someone has to," I said, trying to be polite but not encouraging conversation. I had learned early on that late-night customers who wanted to chat usually wanted more than just small talk. "Must be lonely out here by yourself," he said, still smiling. I did not respond. I just told him his total and held out my hand for payment. He paid with exact change, counting it out slowly, his fingers brushing against my palm in a way that made my skin crawl. When he finally left, I watched through the window as he got into a dark pickup truck and sat there for a moment before driving away. That was Thursday night. He came back Friday night, and Saturday, and Sunday. Each time, he bought the same items. Each time, he made the same comments about how lonely it must be, how dangerous it was for a young woman to be working alone at night, how he worried about me. Each time, he lingered a little longer, stood a little closer, smiled a little wider. By the second week, I was terrified. He started showing up twice a night, once around midnight, once around 3 in the morning. He knew my schedule. He knew when I took my breaks. Once, I came back from using the bathroom to find him standing behind the counter in the employee area, looking at the schedule posted on the wall. "Just wanted to see when you worked next," he said casually, as if trespassing behind the counter was perfectly normal. "So I know when to come visit." I reported him to my manager, but my manager was useless. He said the customer had not technically done anything illegal, that I should just ignore him, that maybe I was overreacting. I started carrying pepper spray in my pocket. I kept my phone charged and ready to call 911. But the man in the purple flannel was not my only problem. The old woman kept coming. Every night at 2:17, asking about her grandson. And I started noticing something else. She never cast a shadow under the fluorescent lights. I know how insane that sounds. But I started paying attention, really watching her. And I swear on everything I hold sacred, that woman did not cast a shadow. The lights were bright enough that everyone who came in had a clear shadow on the floor. Everyone except her. One night, I worked up the courage to ask her name. She looked at me with those clouded eyes and said, "You can call me Mama Slow." The name sent a chill down my spine, though I could not explain why. It felt familiar somehow, like something I had heard before but could not quite place. "Mama Slow," I repeated. "That is an unusual name." She smiled wider, showing those missing teeth. "I am old," she said. "Very old. Been looking for my grandson for a long, long time." "How long?" I asked, before I could stop myself. Her smile faded. Her eyes grew dark. "Since it took him," she whispered. "Since it ate his years." Before I could ask what she meant, she turned and shuffled out the door. I watched through the window, but this time I saw something that made my blood turn cold. She did not walk down the road. She walked toward the woods behind the gas station. And as she reached the tree line, she simply faded. Not walked into the shadows. Faded. Like she was never really there. That night, I could not sleep. I went home at 6 in the morning when my relief arrived, and instead of going to bed, I started researching. I pulled out my old notes from my doctoral research, looking for any references to Mama Slow or stories about something that eats years. What I found made everything worse. Mama Slow was a real person. She had lived in Hollow Ridge in the early 1900s. She had been a midwife and herbalist, someone the community respected. According to local records, she had a grandson who disappeared in 1923. His name was Thomas. He was 7 years old. The boy had vanished while playing near an old mining area north of town. They searched for weeks but never found him. Mama Slow spent the rest of her life looking for him, walking the roads at night, asking everyone if they had seen her grandson. She died in 1968, at the age of 93. But here is the disturbing part. According to multiple accounts, people continued to see Mama Slow walking the roads after her death. For decades. Always looking for Thomas. Always asking the same question. Have you seen my grandson? I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the old newspaper articles I had printed out, and I felt my hands start to shake. I had been talking to a ghost, or something pretending to be one, but that was not even the worst part. As I dug deeper into the history of Hollow Ridge, I found something else. A pattern. Every few years, someone would disappear from the area. Usually someone young, in their teens or 20s. They would vanish without a trace, often near the old mining sites north of town. The mines had been abandoned since the 1930s, after a series of accidents and deaths. The official explanation was bad ventilation and structural instability. But the local stories told a different tale. They said something lived in those mines. Something old. Something hungry. It eats the years. One article from 1956 said, quoting an elderly resident, "It takes the young ones, the ones with life still ahead of them, eats up all their tomorrows and leaves nothing behind." I thought about the old woman's words, since it ate his years. And I thought about the man in the purple flannel, who kept coming back, who knew my schedule, who stood too close and smiled too wide. That night, I went back to work with a knot of dread in my stomach. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was connecting dots that were not meant to be connected. But I could not shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. The man came in at 11:53, earlier than usual. "Hey, Sarah," he said, and I realized with a jolt that I had never told him my name. "I was hoping to catch you. How do you know my name?" I asked, my hand moving to the pepper spray in my pocket. He just smiled. "Small town. People talk. You know how it is." He did not buy anything this time. He just stood there, leaning against the counter, watching me. I tried to busy myself with stocking cigarettes, but I could feel his eyes on me the entire time. "You know," he said conversationally, "I was thinking, you get off at 6 in the morning, right? Maybe I could wait for you. We could get breakfast together. There's this great diner about 20 miles from here." "No, thank you," I said firmly. "Come on," he pressed. "It would be fun. Just you and me. I promise I am a perfect gentleman." I said no. His smile never wavered. "That is too bad. I was really hoping we could spend some time together. Get to know each other better." He left shortly after that, but not before running his fingers along the counter in a way that felt deliberately threatening, like he was marking his territory. At 2:17, Mama Slow shuffled through the door right on schedule. But this time, something was different. This time, she did not ask about her grandson. This time, she looked directly at me with those clouded eyes and said, "You need to leave this place." "What?" I stammered. "Leave," she repeated, her voice urgent. "Before it takes you too. Before it eats your years." "What are you talking about? What is taking people?" She leaned closer, and I could smell something strange on her. Not the old person smell I expected, but something else. Something like damp earth and decay. "The hunger," she whispered. "It lives in the old places. The mines. The deep places where the light does not reach. It has been here longer than the town, longer than the mountains. It wakes up when it gets hungry. And when it wakes up, it sends them. Sends who? The collectors, she said. The ones who find the young ones, the ones with years still left. They bring them to the hunger, feed it. And in return, she trailed off, looking down at her withered hands. In return, it lets them stay. Lets them walk around wearing skin that is not theirs anymore. Wearing faces that used to belong to someone else. My blood went cold. The man in the purple flannel, I whispered. She nodded slowly. He is one of them. Has been for a long time. Longer than you think. He just keeps changing faces, changing names. But always looking for the next one. The next meal for the thing in the deep. But you, I said. Are you one of them too? She smiled sadly. I am what is left. A memory. An echo. I could not save my Thomas. But sometimes I can warn the others. Sometimes the hunger lets me walk. Lets me remember. Maybe because it knows the warning makes the fear taste better. Before I could respond, the lights in the gas station flickered. Once. Twice. Then they went out completely, plunging everything into darkness. I heard Mama Slow's voice, distant now, fading. Run, child. Run now. He is coming back. And this time, he is not coming alone. The lights came back on. Mama Slow was gone. And through the window, I saw 3 vehicles pulling into the parking lot. The purple flannel truck. And 2 others I did not recognize. I did not wait to see who got out. I grabbed my keys, my phone, my pepper spray, and I ran. I went straight out the back door, the one employees use for trash and deliveries. I got to my car and my hands were shaking so badly, I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I saw them in my rearview mirror. 3 figures, standing under the lights, watching me go. The man in the purple flannel was in the middle. On either side of him stood 2 others. One was an older man in overalls. The other was a young woman with long dark hair. They all had the exact same smile. I drove straight to the police station. I told them everything. The stalking. The threats. The weird old woman who was supposed to be dead. They took a report, but I could tell they did not really believe me. They said they would send a car to check on the gas station, make sure everything was okay. I never went back. I quit that job by text message. I did not even collect my final paycheck. 3 days later, Jake called me. He sounded scared. "Sarah," he said. The police found something at the gas station. In the back room. Behind a false wall. What did they find? I asked, even though part of me did not want to know. Bodies, he said quietly. Or what was left of them. 12 people. All young. All reported missing over the past 30 years. Some of the remains dated back even further. They said some of the bodies looked strange. Desiccated. Like something had drained all the moisture out of them. All the life. I felt bile rise in my throat. Did they catch anyone? No, Jake said. But, Sarah, there is something else. The security footage from that night. The night you left. It is gone. All of it. Every camera. It is like someone wiped everything clean. After I hung up with Jake, I sat in my apartment for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. About Mama Slow and her warning. About the man in the purple flannel and his too wide smile. About the bodies hidden behind a wall, their years eaten away by something hungry, something old. I thought about the mines north of town, and the deep places where the light does not reach. And I thought about how many other gas stations there must be, scattered across small towns and lonely crossroads. How many other late-night workers, alone under fluorescent lights, watching the darkness and wondering what might walk through the door at 2:17 in the morning. I moved away from Tennessee shortly after. I am living in Ohio now, working a day shift at a library. No more overnight hours. No more being alone in the dark. But sometimes, when I cannot sleep, I find myself researching, looking for patterns, missing persons in small towns, unsolved disappearances near mining sites, stories about strange visitors who come at the same time every night. The pattern is there if you know where to look. It has been going on for a long, long time. Whatever it is that lives in the deep places, whatever hunger Mama Slow warned me about, it is still out there, still feeding, still sending its collectors to find the young ones, the ones with years left to steal. I got away. But I think about the ones who did not. The 12 bodies they found, and all the others, in all the other hidden places whose years have been eaten away. Sometimes, late at night, I wake up convinced I can hear shuffling footsteps, the tap of a walking stick on pavement, a raspy voice asking, "Have you seen my grandson?" And sometimes, I think I see a purple flannel shirt in a crowd, turning away just as I look. I know it sounds crazy. I know most people will not believe me. But I am posting this because I need people to understand. If you work overnight, if you see the same person coming in at the same time every night, if someone knows your schedule and you never told them, if an old woman asks you about someone she lost a long time ago, pay attention. Trust your instincts. And whatever you do, do not go looking for answers in the deep places. Some hunger should never be fed. Some questions should never be answered. Because it is still out there. Still hungry. Still eating years. And it is always looking for the next meal. The monsters are not hiding in the forest. They are wearing uniforms, carrying keys, smiling at you while they plan their attack. Trust your gut. Document everything. If someone makes you uncomfortable, there is a reason. Your instincts might be the only thing that saves your life. What happens when the people meant to keep you safe become the threat itself? These are true horror stories, horror rooted in real human danger. Now let me tell you about the night I almost died at a mountain resort, and the maintenance man who hunted us. My name is Tyler, and I worked as a lifeguard at a mountain resort in Colorado during the summer of 2018. I was 22 years old, saving money for graduate school. The job was easy. Watch the pool. Make sure our guests did not drown. Go home. I thought it would be a quiet summer. I was wrong. It was a Friday evening in late July. The resort pool was mostly empty except for a bachelorette party. About 8 women in their mid-20s celebrating their friend's upcoming wedding. They were loud, drinking, having fun. I did not mind. I was getting paid to sit in the sun. That was when I noticed him. A man, maybe mid-30s, wearing the resort maintenance uniform. He was standing by the pool equipment shed, maybe 30 feet away from the women. He was not working. He was not checking equipment. He was watching them. Staring, actually. I moved closer to get a better look. He had this expression on his face that made my skin crawl. Intense. Focused. Like he was studying them, memorizing them. One of the women, I would later learn her name was Abby, noticed him too. She made a joke to her friends, something about creepy guys. They laughed it off. But I saw him hear it. I saw his expression change just for a second. Anger flickered across his face before he turned and walked away. I should have reported it then. I did not. An hour later, as I was closing up the pool area, Abby and her friends approached me. They asked if I wanted to join them for dinner at their cabin. They had rented a large place on the resort property, and they had too much food. I hesitated, but they seemed genuinely friendly. I said yes. Their cabin was beautiful. 3 bedrooms, a huge kitchen, a wraparound porch overlooking the forest. We ate, drank, laughed. It felt normal. Safe. Around 10:30 p.m., someone suggested a hike. There was a trail behind the cabin that led to a scenic overlook. The moon was full. It would be beautiful. We started hiking. 8 of them, me making 9. The trail was well maintained, easy to follow in the moonlight. But about 20 minutes in, I started to feel watched. I am not a paranoid person. I grew up hiking in these mountains. I know the difference between normal forest sounds and something wrong. This was wrong. I kept hearing branches snapping behind us, footsteps that did not match our own rhythm. Abby heard it too. She grabbed my arm and whispered, "Is someone following us?" I told the group to stop. We stood in silence, listening. For maybe 30 seconds there was nothing. Then we heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, coming from the trees to our left. We ran back to the cabin. I do not remember much about that run. I remember branches hitting my face. I remember someone screaming. I remember the cabin door slamming shut behind us as we all tumbled inside. We locked the doors. All of them. Checked every window. One of the women called resort security. They said they would send someone, but it would be 20 minutes. We were on the far edge of the property. That was when we heard the footsteps outside, circling the cabin. Slow, methodical, walking around the perimeter, testing. 2 of the women, Abby and her friend Jessica, had been smoking on the back porch when we returned. In our panic, we forgot about them. They were still outside. The screaming started maybe 5 minutes later. High-pitched, terrified. The back door burst open, and both women came running inside, slamming it behind them. They were crying, incoherent. Jessica kept saying, "He was right there. He was right f***ing there." I moved to the door. Through the window I could see movement in the shadows. Someone was out there. The door handle started to turn. I did not think. I just positioned myself in front of the door, bracing. If someone was coming in, they would have to go through me. The door slammed open with enough force to knock me backward. I landed hard on the floor, my head cracking against the hardwood. My vision blurred. Through the haze, I saw him, the maintenance man from the pool. He was inside the cabin. He looked down at me, and I saw his hand move to his waistband. He was reaching for something. A weapon. I was sure of it. Then, Abby was there. She had a golf club from the corner of the room. She swung it like a baseball bat, connected with the side of his head. The sound was terrible. Wet. Hollow. He dropped. The police arrived 12 minutes later. They found us huddled in the living room, the maintenance man unconscious on the floor. We were all in shock. None of us could really explain what had happened coherently. The police took statements. They arrested him. And then they told us something that made everything so much worse. He was new to the resort. He had been hired just 3 weeks earlier. His background check had come back clean. But after they ran his fingerprints, they discovered he had used a fake name. His real identity was tied to several open investigations in other states. Stalking, harassment, assault. He had been using his position as maintenance man to access guest information. Room numbers, names, schedules. He had keys to everything. Master keys that opened every cabin, every room on the property. They found a notebook in his work locker. It had names, descriptions, patterns of behavior. Dozens of women he had been watching. We were just the ones he decided to act on that night. I gave my statement. We all did. He was charged with attempted assault, trespassing, stalking. The resort fired him immediately, but the damage was done. I found out later that at least 5 other women had reported feeling uncomfortable around him, but the resort had dismissed their concerns. I quit the next day. I could not go back to that pool, knowing he had been watching guests for weeks, knowing he had keys to their rooms, knowing what he might have done if we had not fought back. Abby was the hero that night. She saved my life. We stayed in touch afterward. She told me she never went back to Colorado. She has nightmares about that cabin, about the sound of footsteps circling in the dark. I have nightmares too, but mine are different. I dream about all the women in his notebook, the ones whose names I saw before the police took it away. I wonder if they know. I wonder if he did to them what he tried to do to us. The resort settled with all of us out of court. Non-disclosure agreements, financial compensation. They wanted it to go away quietly. But I'm breaking that agreement now because people need to know. When you stay at a resort, when you rent a cabin, when you trust that the staff has been properly vetted, sometimes that trust is misplaced. The maintenance man who attacked us is in prison now. He was sentenced to 8 years. He will be out in 6 with good behavior. I have a notification set up that will alert me when he is released. I know people like him do not stop. They learn. They adapt. They wait. So, I stay ready. I lock my doors 3 times. I check my windows before bed. I never go hiking alone, even during the day. And when I see someone staring too long, watching too closely, I trust my instincts now. I report it. I do not wait. I do not dismiss it, because the maintenance man taught me something that summer. We explore what happens when your own home becomes your prison, when something unseen tears apart everything you have built. Now, let me tell you about the Bell family, and the terror that claimed them in 1817. My name is Richard Williams Bell. I'm the 6th child of John and Lucy Bell, born in Robertson County, Tennessee, in 1811. What I am about to share with you happened to my family, to me, when I was just a boy of 6 years old. People have asked me over the years if I made this up, if my family exaggerated what occurred in our home between 1817 and 1820. I can tell you with absolute certainty, we did not. We moved to Robertson County in 1804, when I was not yet born. My father purchased 320 acres along the Red River, thick forest land that required clearing. He built our home with his own hands, a log house that stood proud on a hill overlooking the river. We were prosperous. Father was an elder at the Red River Baptist Church, respected by everyone in the settlement. Mother opened our home to anyone who needed shelter or meal. For 13 years, we lived in peace. The summer of 1817 changed everything. Father came home from the cornfield one afternoon, his face pale as fresh milk. He would not speak of what he had seen, not at first. But we learned later that he had encountered something in the field, something that looked like a dog but was not quite right. Its body was malformed, twisted. When he raised his rifle and fired, it simply vanished. That night, the knocking began. I remember lying in the bed I shared with my brothers, Joel, Drury, and John Jr. The sound came from outside, a steady rapping on the wooden walls of our home. Father would rush outside with his rifle, but there was never anyone there. No tracks in the dirt. No sign of any person or animal. The knocking would stop the moment he stepped through the door, then begin again as soon as he came back inside. This continued for weeks. Father forbade us from speaking of it to anyone in town. He was convinced it was a prankster, someone playing tricks on our family. He did not want to give them the satisfaction of knowing they had frightened us. But it was not a prankster. The sounds evolved. What began as simple knocking became scratching, gnawing sounds like a rat chewing through wood. My brothers and I would hear it beneath our beds at night, frantic and desperate. We would leap from our bunks, light a candle, search everywhere. There was never anything there. No marks on the wood. No sign of any creature. Then came the night we heard something gulping for air beneath our bed. The sound of someone choking, gasping, fingers clawing at wood. I was terrified. We all were. That night, Father finally called for help. Our neighbor, a man Father trusted deeply, agreed to stay the night in our home. He heard everything. The knocking, the scratching, the horrible gasping sounds. He left before dawn, his face white with fear. Word spread quickly through Robertson County after that. The townspeople rallied around us. They took turns staying in our home, watching through the night. No one could explain what was happening. Some thought my sister Betsy was behind it, that she wanted attention. Others suspected ventriloquism. They even watched us as we slept, documenting that none of us were making the sounds. But the entity did not care who was watching. It continued. By the spring of 1818, the sounds had given way to something worse. Physical attacks. My sister Betsy would wake up screaming, her cheeks red with handprints that appeared from nowhere. Something unseen would grab her hair and drag her across the floor. She would be stuck with pins, slapped, pinched until bruises covered her arms. Father began to change. I watched him deteriorate over months. He would be speaking to someone, his eyes clear and focused, when suddenly his jaw would go slack. His face would twitch, violently, like something inside him was trying to get out. When the seizures passed, he would wander back to his room and sit on his bed for hours, staring at nothing. The entity began to speak in the winter of 1818. At first it was whispers, barely audible. Then the voice grew stronger, clearer. It was a woman's voice, sharp and cruel. She called herself Kate. Kate hated Father. She told him daily that she would kill him, that he deserved to die. She never explained why. When pressed, she would only say, "He needs killing." She tormented Betsy most of all. When Betsy fell in love with a local boy named Joshua Gardner, Kate became violent. She told Betsy she would never allow the marriage. She would shriek through the house whenever Joshua visited, throwing objects, slamming doors. Betsy tried to resist, tried to hold on to Joshua, but Kate would not relent. Easter of 1821. I watched my sister meet Joshua by the riverbank. She gave him back his ring. She told him she could not marry him, that she could not subject him to what lived in our house. Joshua wept. So did Betsy. Kate sang victoriously that night, a horrible cheerful song that echoed through our home. Father's health collapsed entirely after Betsy ended her engagement. The seizures came more frequently. His throat would swell shut. He could barely eat. By December of 1820, he could not leave his bed. December 19th, 1820. Father did not wake up for breakfast. We found him unconscious in his room, his breathing shallow. My brother John Jr. went to retrieve Father's medicine from the cabinet, but every bottle was gone. In their place was a single glass vial filled with a dark, smoky liquid none of us had ever seen before. The doctor arrived. He tested the liquid on a stray cat. The animal died within minutes. Father never woke up. He died the next morning, December 20th. The only death in Tennessee officially attributed to the supernatural. At Father's funeral, as the minister spoke and Mother wept, Kate's laughter rang out across the cemetery. She sang drinking songs, celebrating, mocking us as we buried our father. I will never forget that sound. Pure malevolence. After Father died, Kate left us alone for the most part. She promised Mother she would return in 7 years. She kept that promise, visiting my brother John Jr. in 1828 for 3 weeks. She spoke to him about philosophy, about the future. She predicted the Civil War with eerie accuracy. Then she left again, promising to return in 107 years. I am an old man now. I have carried this story my entire life. People ask me if I believe in what happened, if it was real. I tell them this: I was there. I lived through it. I watched my father waste away from something we could not see, could not fight, could not understand. I heard Kate's voice with my own ears. I felt her presence in our home, cold and hateful and impossibly real. The Bell Witch was not a ghost story. It was not folklore. It was our lives, torn apart by something that should not exist. I document this now because the truth must be preserved. We were not hysterical. We were not delusional. We were a family destroyed by forces beyond our comprehension. And if you ever hear knocking on your walls at night, if you ever feel watched in your own home, believe it. Trust what you cannot see. It may be the only warning you get. Tonight, we explore what happens when the people we trust to enter our homes become the very ones we should fear most. Now, let me tell you about Sarah Chen and the discovery that shattered everything she thought she knew about safety. I am a 29-year-old law student, or I was until 3 months ago. Now I am not sure what I am anymore. What I do know is that I cannot sleep without checking every lock 3 times, cannot shower without my phone in the bathroom, and cannot trust anyone who says they are just there to help. This happened at the Azure Heights apartments in downtown Athens, Ohio. I had lived there for 7 years while completing my undergraduate degree and then law school. It was one of those upscale complexes that cost too much but promise safety, security, 24-hour maintenance. The kind of place where you pay extra to feel protected. That promise was a lie. It started small, the way these things always do. Items going missing. A necklace I was certain I had left on my dresser. Underwear disappearing from my laundry. Food I did not remember eating. I told myself I was stressed, that law school was making me forgetful. I was about to graduate after all. The pressure was immense. Then came the air conditioning issue. It was late April, unseasonably warm. My unit stopped working, and I submitted a maintenance request. The next day, a man named Timothy showed up. He was in his mid-40s, average height, wearing the standard maintenance uniform. He smiled too much. That should have been my first warning. He fixed the air conditioning quickly, but something felt wrong. The way he looked around my apartment, the way he paused at my bedroom door, the way he asked if I lived alone. I told him yes, because that was the truth, and I was raised to be polite. That night, I could not shake the feeling that something was off. I did a walkthrough of my apartment. Everything seemed normal. But in the bathroom, I noticed the drop ceiling tile was slightly askew, tilted just enough to catch my eye. I am not tall enough to reach it without standing on something, so I grabbed a chair from my kitchen. When I pushed the tile aside and looked up, my heart stopped. There was a camera. A small black ribbon-style camera, barely visible, with a lens pointed directly at the shower. An extension cord ran from it, across the ceiling space, disappearing toward the wall that connected to the maintenance closet. I am in law school. I know about evidence. I know about chain of custody. So before I did anything else, I pulled out my phone and took photographs. I documented everything. The camera, the cord, the angle, the timestamp. Then I called 911. The police arrived within 20 minutes. 2 officers, professional and thorough. I showed them what I had found. I gave them my theory about Timothy, the maintenance man who had been in my apartment just hours earlier. One officer climbed up to examine the camera more closely. The other one took my statement. They asked me if I had used that bathroom since Timothy's visit. I had. Multiple times. I had showered. I had changed clothes. The realization hit me like ice water. The officers called for a detective. While we waited, they searched the rest of my apartment. In the maintenance closet, the one I assumed was always locked, they found the door slightly ajar. Inside, the extension cord led up through the ceiling, exactly as I had predicted. There was also a key ring with what looked like master keys to every unit in the building. Detective Harrison arrived 40 minutes later. He was methodical, photographing everything, interviewing me in detail. He asked about Timothy, about previous maintenance visits, about anything unusual I might have noticed. That was when I remembered. The necklace, the underwear, the food. All of it had started 6 months ago, right around the time I had requested maintenance for a leaking faucet. Timothy had been the one to fix it. Detective Harrison's expression darkened. He asked if I would be willing to review my bank statements, my calendar, anything that might show a pattern of when items went missing and when maintenance had been in my apartment. I pulled up everything on my laptop. The pattern was undeniable. Every single incident of missing items corresponded with a maintenance visit. Sometimes there was not even a work order. Timothy had simply been in my apartment. The detective made a call. Within an hour, they had a search warrant for Timothy's home and vehicle. What they found made national news. 73 videos. 39 different women. 13 children. The footage dated back to 2019, spanning multiple apartment complexes where Timothy had worked. Some videos were of people in bathrooms. Some were of people sleeping. Some were of people in moments that should have been completely private. On his computer, they found detailed notes, names, schedules, routines. He knew when we worked, when we came home, when we were alone. He had photographs of our driver's licenses, copies of our lease agreements, our emergency contact information. He had used his position, his access, his keys to violate us in ways that would take years of therapy to even begin to process. But here's the part that still keeps me awake at night. The police contacted every woman in those videos. Most of them had no idea. They had never noticed anything missing, never suspected anything was wrong. They had lived their lives, trusting that the maintenance man was just doing his job, while he documented their most private moments. I was one of the lucky ones. I noticed. I investigated. I called the police. During the trial, I learned more details that made everything worse. Timothy had worked in property management for over 15 years. He had been fired from 3 previous positions, but each time, the companies had simply let him go quietly, unwilling to face the legal complications of reporting him. They gave him neutral references. They allowed him to move on to the next complex, the next group of unsuspecting tenants. The apartment management at Azure Heights had hired him without conducting a thorough background check. When I later sued them, their lawyers tried to claim they had followed standard procedures. But discovery revealed they had skipped the criminal background check to fill the position quickly. They had prioritized convenience over safety. Timothy was convicted on 73 counts of video voyeurism and illegal use of minors in nudity-oriented material. He received 6 to 9 years. With good behavior, he could be out in 6. 6 years for violating 73 people. The judge ordered him to register as a sex offender for 25 years. His lawyer tried to argue that he had never physically touched anyone, that this was somehow less serious than other crimes. The prosecutor showed the jury photographs of the children he had recorded. That argument did not last long. I graduated from law school 2 months after the trial ended. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I was installing security cameras in my new apartment, learning about electronic countermeasures, researching how to detect hidden cameras. I moved out of Athens. I could not stay there. Every time I saw a maintenance worker, every time someone knocked on my door, I felt my chest tighten. I started having panic attacks in public bathrooms, convinced someone was watching. My therapist says I have post-traumatic stress disorder. She says it will get better with time. I am not sure I believe her. But I am also angry. Angry at the property management companies that prioritize their reputation over our safety. Angry at the employers who gave Timothy neutral references instead of reporting him. Angry at a system that allowed a predator to move from building to building for over a decade. I am now working with a law firm that specializes in tenant rights and corporate negligence. We are going after every property management company that employed Timothy and failed to conduct proper background checks. We are pushing for legislation that would require mandatory reporting of suspected voyeurism in rental properties. Some people ask me why I am doing this. They say I should move on, focus on healing. But I cannot move on when Timothy will be out in 6 years. I cannot heal when I know there are other maintenance workers, other property managers, other people in positions of trust who are doing exactly what he did. I am sharing this story because I want people to understand something crucial. The people who have access to your home, your private spaces, your life, need to be vetted thoroughly. Property management companies need to be held accountable. Background checks need to be comprehensive and updated regularly. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate. If items are going missing, document it. If you notice anything unusual about your apartment after maintenance visits, check everything. Look at the ceiling tiles. Check for small holes in walls. Search for anything that seems out of place. I did not want to become the person who suspects everyone. But I also never wanted to be the person in 73 videos, documented without consent, violated in the place I was supposed to feel safest. Timothy kept a journal. The police found it during the search of his home. In it, he wrote about his victims. He rated us. He described his favorite moments. He wrote about the thrill of knowing we had no idea he was watching. One entry was about me. It was dated 3 days before I found the camera. He wrote that I was becoming suspicious, that I had started looking around more carefully after his visits. He wrote that he would need to be more careful or find a new apartment. I found the camera before he could move it. I think about that entry often. I think about how close I came to never knowing. How easily I could have been another name in his journal, another video on his computer, another woman who never suspected. The apartment complex settled the lawsuit for an undisclosed amount. They implemented new policies about background checks and maintenance access. They installed security cameras in all maintenance closets. They claim they have learned from this incident. I hope that is true. But I also know that policies only work if people follow them, and corporations only change when they are forced to. Timothy will be released in 2031. I have a notification set up that will alert me when he completes his sentence. I know people like him do not just stop. So, I stay ready. I stay vigilant. I stay angry. Because anger is what keeps me fighting. Anger is what turned me from a victim into an advocate. Anger is what pushes me to make sure this never happens to anyone else. They say, trust your gut. I did. And because I did, 72 other women and 13 children now know what happened to them. They have justice, or at least as much justice as our system can provide. But justice does not erase the violation. It does not give back the sense of safety that was stolen. It does not make me feel comfortable in my own home. So, I check my locks 3 times before bed. I inspect every hotel room, every rental property, every bathroom I use. I carry a small device that detects hidden cameras. I do these things not because I am paranoid, but because I am realistic. Because I learned the hardest way possible that the people we trust to keep us safe are sometimes the very ones we should fear most. And I learned that when someone has the keys to your home, they also have the power to destroy your peace of mind. That is a lesson I will carry for the rest of my life. To this day, I still cannot use public bathrooms without checking for cameras. It has been 3 years. The therapist says the hypervigilance will fade. It has not faded yet. Timothy is scheduled for release in 6 years. I will be 35 years old. He will be 51. And I will be watching. Because that is what survivors do. We watch. We remember. And we make sure it never happens again. In this story, we explore what happens when the line between safety and ruin is reduced to a single step. The world holds its breath, a momentary lapse, a photograph never taken. Now, let me tell you about Craig Olson, Linda Ann Munlin, and the terrible truth that waited for them at the edge of the world. I used to work as a park ranger at Bryce Canyon National Park in Utah. 23 years I wore that uniform, 23 years I walked those trails. And in all that time, I learned one unshakable truth: the canyon does not forget. It records everything. Every scream, every prayer, every final moment of terror. The stone walls absorb it all like a tape running endlessly beneath the earth. They call it the stone tape theory. The researchers who come here with their electromagnetic field detectors and their infrared cameras, searching for proof of residual hauntings. The idea is that traumatic events, particularly those involving intense emotion or sudden death, somehow imprint themselves onto the environment, especially into crystalline rock formations like the ones we have here at Bryce. The limestone walls, they say, act as natural recording devices, playing back the final moments of the dead to anyone sensitive enough to hear them. I never believed in such things. Not until February 14th, 1991. Craig Olson was 13 years old when his family brought him to Bryce Point that Valentine's Day morning. I remember the cold, how it settled into your bones, no matter how many layers you wore, and I remember the Olson family because they seemed so ordinary. Mother, father, 2 kids. The younger one, maybe 8 or 9. They were laughing as they approached the overlook, cameras swinging from their necks, breath misting in the frigid air. I was doing my routine patrol, checking the railings, making sure the ice had not made the pathways treacherous. I nodded to the father as I passed. He smiled back. Everything was normal. Everything was safe. Then I heard the mother scream. By the time I reached them, Craig was already over the railing. I watched him inch along a narrow ledge, maybe 3 feet below the overlook, his sneakers sliding on loose gravel, both hands pressed flat against the canyon wall. His father was leaning over the railing, his face drained of all color. "His camera," the father said, and his voice was hollow, empty. He dropped his camera. I could see it clutched in Craig's left hand, a black Nikon that probably cost a few $100s. Not worth a life. Never worth a life. But to a 13-year-old boy, to someone young and invincible and convinced that bad things only happen to other people, it was everything. "Craig," I called down, keeping my voice steady, authoritative. "Stay exactly where you are. I am coming to get you." He looked up at me, and I will never forget his expression. Not fear. Not yet. Pride. He had retrieved his camera. He had solved his own problem. He was turning back toward the railing, reaching up with his right hand, when his left foot found the gravel. The human body makes a specific sound when it falls 300 feet onto canyon rock. It is not a sound you forget. It is not a sound that fades with time. The canyon wall remembers it, plays it back in the early morning hours, when the air is still and cold, when conditions are exactly right. I have heard Craig Olson fall 1,000 times since that morning. The rangers after me, they have heard it too. We do not talk about it. 4 years later, on July 20th, 1995, I was assigned to Inspiration Point on the evening shift. It was my favorite assignment usually. The sunset view from Inspiration Point is one of the most spectacular sights in the American Southwest. Layers of pink and orange stone glowing like embers as the sun drops below the western rim. Linda Ann Munlin was 36 years old, a school teacher from Denver who had driven down for the weekend with 3 of her friends. I saw them arrive around 7, just as the golden hour was beginning. They were in good spirits, passing around a bottle of wine, legal as long as they stayed in designated areas, laughing at jokes I could not hear. I should have been watching them more carefully. But sunset brought crowds, families with children, elderly couples holding hands, amateur photographers jockeying for the best angle. I was moving through the groups, reminding people to stay behind the railings, to watch their step, to respect the boundary between the viewing area and the drop beyond. That is when I saw Linda step over the low stone barrier at the far end of the overlook. "Ma'am," I called out, already moving toward her. "You need to step back behind the boundary." She waved at me, smiling, not dismissive, but friendly, as if to say she knew what she was doing. She would be just a moment. She pointed down at something. I followed her gesture and saw them, a small cluster of purple flowers. Some variety of aster or penstemon, growing impossibly from a crack in the stone, maybe 2 feet beyond the boundary. Her friends called to her. I heard one of them, a woman with dark hair, say, "Linda, come on, it is not worth it." But Linda had already committed. She took one step, then another, leaning forward, stretching out her hand. The flowers were just out of reach. I was running now, other visitors turning to stare, and Linda leaned a little farther, just a few more inches, and the rim, which had looked so solid, which had seemed so stable, gave way like sand. She did not scream. That is what I remember most. Craig Olson had screamed the whole way down, a sound that cut through the morning air like a siren. But Linda Ann Munlin simply fell, silently, and the only sound was her hat, a wide-brimmed straw thing, fluttering past the edge a moment later. 300 feet. Almost the exact same drop as Craig. Almost the exact same spot, though I did not realize it until later, until I went back through the incident reports and saw the patterns. The stone tape theory suggests that certain locations become focal points for residual energy, places where the veil between past and present grows thin. Bryce Canyon is full of such places. The limestone here is ancient, compressed layers of lake bed and marine organisms that lived and died millions of years ago, their bodies crushed into stone that now rises in fantastic spires and hoodoos and walls of striated pink and white and orange. Organic material, the researchers say, retains energy better than inorganic. The calcium carbonate that makes up limestone, the fossilized remains of countless tiny lives, might serve as a natural medium for recording traumatic events. Like magnetic tape. Like a vinyl record. Playing back the moment of death, over and over, whenever conditions align. I started hearing them both after Linda died. Craig in the mornings when the temperature dropped below freezing, Linda in the evenings when the wind came from the west. Sometimes just the sounds, the scrape of sneakers on gravel, the soft rush of fabric falling. Sometimes more. Shadows that moved wrong. Cold spots that had no business existing in July. Other rangers reported similar experiences. Visitors too. A woman from Ohio swore she saw a teenage boy climbing along the ledge at Bryce Point. Except when she looked closer, he was not there, had never been there, and the ledge she'd seen him on was unreachable without climbing gear. A photographer captured what looked like a figure in a straw hat standing at the very edge of Inspiration Point in a long exposure shot, but when he checked the viewing area, it had been empty. The Park Service does not acknowledge these reports officially. We installed new railings. We posted additional warning signs. We emphasized in every safety briefing the importance of staying within designated boundaries. What we did not discuss was the mounting evidence that something at Bryce Canyon was recording these deaths, preserving them, playing them back for reasons we could not understand. 21-year-old Richard Jacobson fell 700 feet from Flatiron Peak in the Superstition Wilderness in Arizona. He had been trying to take a photograph of the sunrise. 65-year-old Carl Mitchell slipped at the Grand Canyon, tumbling 130 feet into the gorge. He had stepped too close to the edge. At Yosemite, 3 young hikers, 2 men and a woman, ignored warning signs about increased water flow, and were swept over vernal fall, 317 feet of churning white water and rock. I researched every one of these cases after I retired. I needed to understand if what was happening at Bryce was isolated, or if it was part of something larger. What I found terrified me. Every single incident occurred near areas with significant limestone deposits or ancient stone formations. Every single victim had made a conscious choice to cross a boundary, to step beyond the designated safe zone, to reach for something, a photograph, a flower, a better view, and at every single location, subsequent visitors reported anomalous experiences. Sounds and sights that should not have been there. The stone was recording them. All of them. Every moment of terror. Every instant of realization that they had made an irreversible mistake. Every final second of life. Absorbed into the mineral matrix of ancient rock and played back in an endless loop for anyone unlucky enough to be present at the right time under the right conditions. Colleen Burns was a 34-year-old marketing director for Yelp Orlando when she visited the Grand Canyon in 2015. By all accounts, she was vibrant, full of life, someone who approached every experience with enthusiasm and joy. Her friends described her as someone who made everything sparkle, who lived at maximum intensity. She died stepping aside so someone else could enjoy the view. One moment of selfless courtesy, one step backward without looking, and she fell to her death from a narrow trail above the canyon floor. Her memorial was full of people who loved her, who could not believe that someone so alive could simply cease to exist. They talked about spreading her sparkle, about keeping her memory alive. They did not know that the canyon had already done that, had preserved her final moment in stone that would stand for millennia, playing back that instant of loss over and over and over. I am 71 years old now. I have not been back to Bryce Canyon in 6 years. But I still hear them sometimes, late at night when I cannot sleep, when my mind drifts back to those years patrolling the rim. Craig's scream, high and terrified and cut short. Linda's silence, somehow worse. The soft thud of impact that my mind supplies even though I was too far away to actually hear it. The stone tape theory is not a theory. It is a fact. But it is not about residual hauntings or paranormal energy or spirits trapped between worlds. It is about geology, about chemistry, about the way calcium carbonate and quartz and ancient organic matter can preserve information at the molecular level. It is about the universe keeping perfect records of every tragedy, every mistake, every irreversible moment. The canyon remembers. The stone records. And somewhere in the crystalline structure of Bryce Canyon limestone, Craig Olson will be 13 years old and reaching for his camera forever. Linda Ann Munlin will be leaning forward to pick a flower for the rest of eternity. Richard Jacobson will be slipping at sunrise. Carl Mitchell will be losing his footing. Colleen Burns will be stepping aside. They are all there, preserved in stone, waiting for someone sensitive enough to hear them, to see them, to feel the echo of their final moments bleeding through from the past. I am sharing this because I need people to understand something important. Those railings are not suggestions. Those warning signs are not decoration. When park rangers tell you to stay back from the edge, we are not being overly cautious or trying to ruin your experience. We are trying to keep you from becoming another recording. Because here's what they do not tell you in the safety briefings, what we are not allowed to say officially. Once the stone records you, it does not let go. You become part of the canyon, your final moment playing back again and again, not as a ghost or a spirit, but as a memory embedded in stone, felt by visitors who will never know your name, heard by rangers who will file reports that will be quietly ignored. The canyon does not forgive. It does not forget. It simply records. Stay behind the railings. Respect the boundaries. That photograph, that flower, that perfect view, it is not worth the price. Because the price is not just your life. It is your death, preserved forever. Played back in an endless loop for as long as the stone endures. I used to work as a park ranger at Bryce Canyon National Park. I do not work there anymore. But sometimes on cold February mornings or warm July evenings, when the conditions are exactly right, I swear I can still hear them falling. The canyon remembers everything, and it never stops playing back the tape. What happens when preparation meets the unpredictable fury of nature, when doing everything right still is not enough? Let me tell you about John Robles Howell and the afternoon when the canyon became something hungry. I need to tell you about my Aunt Jean, because what happened to her changed how I understand the world. This is not a story about mistakes or poor judgment. This is about how fragile the line is between life and death, how thin the membrane that separates a beautiful afternoon from absolute terror. Jean was 64 years old, a math teacher from Sedona, Arizona. She had been hiking for decades, always careful, always prepared. She was the person who made lists, who checked weather forecasts 3 times, who told everyone exactly where she would be. She was not reckless. She was not inexperienced. She did everything right. On the afternoon of August 25th, 2023, Jean drove to Bryce Canyon National Park in Utah. She planned to hike the Fairyland Loop Trail, an 8-mile route she had completed before. The forecast showed partly cloudy skies, a 60% chance of afternoon showers. In canyon country, afternoon storms are common in late summer. They pass quickly. Jean had hiked through rain many times. Before she left the trailhead at 2:02 in the afternoon, she sent my mother a photo. The sky behind her was gray, but not threatening. Clouds, but nothing dark. She smiled at the camera, her hiking poles in hand, her pack properly fitted. She texted, "Starting now. Should be back by 6. Love you." That was the last message anyone received from her. I have thought about those next minutes more times than I can count. I have tried to imagine what she saw, what she heard, what she thought as the storm arrived, because it did not arrive slowly. It arrived like something tearing through a curtain. The National Weather Service later confirmed that a microburst storm cell formed directly over the Fairyland Loop area at approximately 2:15 in the afternoon. Microbursts are violent, localized downdrafts that hit the ground and spread outward with devastating force. They can produce winds over 100 miles per hour and drop massive amounts of rain in minutes. They are difficult to predict. They appear suddenly. Jean would have been about a half-mile into the trail when the sky opened. What people do not understand about flash floods in canyon country is how fast they happen. The ground in these areas is mostly rock and hard-packed clay. It does not absorb water. When inches of rain fall in minutes, it has nowhere to go except down. Every slope becomes a river. Every drainage becomes a torrent. And the water does not flow, it crashes, carrying tons of debris, rocks, mud, entire trees. The Fairyland Loop Trail follows several dry washes and narrow canyon sections. These are beautiful in good weather, with their sculpted walls and twisted hoodoos. In a flash flood, they become death traps. Search and rescue teams told us later that Jean tried to reach higher ground. They found evidence that she attempted to climb the canyon wall. Her hiking poles were discovered jammed into a crevice about 15 feet up, as if she had been using them to pull herself higher. But the walls in that section are steep, loose sedimentary rock that crumbles under weight. And the water was rising faster than anyone could climb. I've tried to imagine the sound, the roar of it. Flash floods do not sound like rain or rivers. Survivors describe them as sounding like freight trains, like explosions, like the earth itself breaking apart. The water carries so much debris that it becomes a liquid avalanche, heavy and solid and impossibly fast. Jean was found nearly a mile off the trail, in Campbell Canyon, a narrow side drainage that had been completely dry that morning. The force of the water had carried her body through terrain that would be difficult to cross on foot. Rangers said the floods scoured the canyon down to bedrock, removing decades of soil and vegetation in minutes. They found her pack 20 yards from her body, still intact. Inside were all the things she had brought, all the preparations she had made. Water, purification tablets, emergency shelter, first aid kit, whistle, flares, map and compass, extra food, fully charged phone in a waterproof case. None of it mattered. The medical examiner determined she died from blunt force trauma and drowning. The water had slammed her into rocks repeatedly as it carried her down the canyon. She had fought, they said. There were defensive injuries on her hands and arms. She had tried to grab onto something, anything. But there was nothing to hold in that torrent, except more water and more violence. What haunts me most is the timeline. The storm lasted less than 20 minutes. By 2:45 in the afternoon, it was over. The sun came out. Hikers who had been sheltering at the trailhead emerged and continued their hikes, not knowing that a mile away, my aunt was already dead. The water receded, almost as quickly as it had come. By 3 in the afternoon, the washes were dry again, just damp rock and scattered debris. When Jean did not return by 7 that evening, my mother called the park. Rangers began searching at dusk. They found her car in the parking area, exactly where she said it would be. They found her note on the dashboard with her planned route and expected return time. Everything she was supposed to do, she had done. They did not find her body until the next morning. A helicopter spotted her red jacket in the mud. The park rangers were kind when they spoke to our family. They emphasized that Jean was experienced and prepared. They said she made no mistakes. They said flash floods are one of the leading causes of death in canyon country because they are so unpredictable and so violent. They said doing everything right sometimes is not enough. But here is what they did not say, what I have learned in the years since. Flash floods kill dozens of people every year in the American Southwest. Many of them are experienced hikers. Many of them check the weather. Many of them do everything by the book. And it does not matter, because weather in canyon country is not predictable on human timescales. A storm can form in minutes. A wall of water can appear around a bend with no warning. You can be standing in sunshine and die 60 seconds later. After Jean died, I started researching flash floods obsessively. I needed to understand. I found accounts from survivors, from people who had been caught and somehow lived. They all described the same thing, the same sequence. First, the sound, a distant roar that grows louder. Then the birds go silent. Then you feel it in your feet, a vibration in the ground. Then the smell, wet earth and churned mud. Then the air pressure changes, a sudden heaviness. And then the water arrives, brown and full of debris, moving faster than you can run, higher than you can climb. Most people have about 30 seconds from first warning to impact. Jean did everything right. She checked the weather. She brought emergency supplies. She told people where she would be. She was fit and experienced. She understood the dangers. And she died anyway because sometimes nature does not care about preparation. Sometimes the canyon just swallows everything. I think about her last moments often. I wonder if she had time to be afraid, or if it happened too fast. I wonder if she thought about us, or if survival instinct took over completely. I wonder if she knew, in those final seconds, that she was not going to make it out. The park installed new warning signs after her death. They clarified the flash flood danger. They emphasized that even small storms can cause deadly flooding. They tell hikers to check weather obsessively and turn back at the first sign of rain. But people still die every year. Because you cannot legislate against bad luck. You cannot prepare for something that happens in seconds. Jean's death was ruled accidental. Natural causes, they called it. An act of God. But It did not feel accidental to me. It felt like the canyon had been waiting, patient and indifferent, for the right moment. And when that moment came, when the sky opened and the water rose, the canyon took what it wanted. I have not been hiking since. I probably never will again. Because I understand now what I did not before. The wilderness does not care how prepared you are. It does not care how experienced or careful or smart you are. It does not care if you have a family waiting, a life to return to, plans for tomorrow. The canyon is always hungry. And sometimes, doing everything right still is not enough. Jean Robles Howell was recovered from Campbell Canyon on August 26, 2023. She was survived by 2 sisters, 3 nephews, and 42 years of students whose lives she changed. The Fairyland Loop Trail remains open. Flash flood warnings are posted. People still hike it every day. Some of them will not come back.